Hi, Iola Elementary students. It's Mrs. Prather again. And today I have an email from Mrs. Caillouet-Weiner asking her students to build a robot out of clean trash to celebrate Earth Day. Well, that got me to thinking about I have something that kind of looks like a robot, and it's made out of clean trash, and it's the Tin Man. He's made out of vegetable cans, and a coffee can, and it looks like sardine cans for his feet, and he has a funnel on top and some pieces of tin cut from other objects. Anyway, so when I got to thinking about him, I thought, oh, I have a book about a robot, kind of looks like that, called Baby Brains and RoboMom. But you know how it is with Mrs. Prather, she can't just read one if there's two. And this is the sequel to the first one. And the first one is called Baby Brains by Simon James. And I would like to share that with you today. Baby Brains, the smartest baby in the whole world. I'm going to share this book first, and then I'll share Baby Brains and RoboMom. Here we go. Baby Brains by Simon James. In the months before Baby Brains was born, Mrs. Brains was very busy. She read out loud every night to the baby inside her tummy. She played music and languages on headphones to her baby during the day, and Mr. and Mrs. Brains wanted to make sure their baby was going to be very smart. They even turned up the television when the news came on. Mr. and Mrs. Brains were very excited when their baby was born. It was a boy. Our very own Baby Brains, said Mr. Brains proudly. And when they brought him home from the hospital, Mrs. Brains laid him down in the brand new crib. Sleep tight, Baby Brains, she whispered. The next morning, Mrs. Brains was on her way to get breakfast when she heard some strange noises in the living room. Mrs. Brains opened the door to see her baby sitting on the sofa, reading the morning paper. By afternoon, Baby Brains was fixing the car. We certainly have a bright one here, said Mr. Brains. That evening, Baby Brains spoke his first words. I'd like to go to school tomorrow, he said. The next day, Baby Brains visited the local school. He sat down with the children and answered all the questions. The children were amazed. And at the end of the afternoon, the teacher thanked Baby Brains. I don't think I've ever learned so much in one day, she said. On the way home, Baby Brains said he wanted to go to college and study medicine. After just 2 weeks, Baby Brains began working as a doctor at the local hospital. He was very popular with all the staff and patients, and word soon spread about the extraordinary Baby Brains. Everyone wanted to meet him. And one night, some space scientists called. They asked if Baby Brains would like to help with their next space mission. The following day, Mr. and Mrs. Brains and their baby traveled to the Space Center. After training hard over the weekend, Baby Brains waved goodbye to Mr. and Mrs. Brains and blasted off into outer space. Everyone in the world held their breath as they watched Baby Brains take his first spacewalk. Tell us how you feel on this special occasion, radioed ground control. Baby Brains looked up at the vast starlit sky above him. He looked down at the vast starlit sky below him. He looked at the whole world in front of him and mumbled something. We can't quite hear you, radioed ground control. Could you repeat that? I want my mommy, wailed Baby Brains. That's enough, Mrs. Brains yelled to the space controller. Bring my baby home right now. Baby Brains was flown home as quickly as possible. He felt very embarrassed as he stepped down from the hatch. But through the crowd of photographers and cameramen, Mrs. Brains came running. Our beautiful little baby, sighed Mrs. Brains as she lifted him high into the air. Our brave little baby, said Mr. Brains. Can we go home?" asked Baby Brains. At home, Mrs. Brains gave Baby Brains a warm bath, which made him feel a lot better. And Mr. Brains tickled him, which made him laugh. And Mrs. Brains sang Baby Brains to sleep, and they gently laid him down in the brand new crib. It was good to have their baby home again. "Our very own Baby Brains," whispered Mrs. Brains. And from that day on, Baby Brains spent most of his time at home doing the things that most babies do, except, that is, on weekends, when he still liked to help out at the local hospital. Baby Brains by Simon James. And the sequel is Baby Brains and RoboMom. Before Baby Brains was born, Mrs. Brains ate lots of fish and nuts, which are good food for brains. She also played foreign languages on headphones and read out loud to the baby inside her tummy. Mr. and Mrs. Brains were hoping for a clever baby. But when Baby Brains was born, they were amazed to see just how clever he turned out to be. When the hospital scanned Baby Brains' head, they compared his brain with a normal baby's. And they were amazed at the difference. At home, Baby Brains had no time for toys. He preferred working on the computer and doing experiments with his chemistry set. But most of all, he loved designing new inventions. Baby Brains invented the first remote-controlled self-rocking cradle. He also invented the first fully motorized stroller. But despite his brilliant labor-saving inventions, Baby Brains could see how tired his parents were at the end of each day. Once, his mom even fell asleep during his bedtime story. And one night, Baby Brains stayed up inventing something special to help Mr. and Mrs. Brains. He was sure science and technology would have the answer. It took him all night and well into the next morning. Finally, at lunchtime, he was able to present Mrs. Brains with his own most ambitious invention to date. "It's RoboMom," called Baby Brains. "Gosh," said Mrs. Brains, "what does she do?" "The ironing for starters," said Baby Brains. "Fantastic," said Mrs. Brains. RoboMom soon took over all the household chores. She cooked the evening meal and cleaned up afterward. "Wonderful," said Mrs. Brains. The following day, RoboMom washed the car. "Terrific," said Mr. Brains. By the weekend, RoboMom had taken over looking after the baby. First, she changed Baby Brains' diaper, but Baby Brains preferred his mom to do that. Later, she gave Baby Brains a bath, but Baby Brains preferred his dad to do that. The worst was to come when RoboMom insisted on putting Baby Brains to bed. "Don't let the robo-bugs bite," said RoboMom. "She's doing too much," said Mrs. Brains. "And what's all that smoke coming out of her head?" said Mr. Brains. The next morning, instead of cereal, RoboMom served nuts and bolts and engine oil for breakfast. "Something is wrong," said Mr. Brains. "I think I'll have a yogurt," said Mrs. Brains. Later, RoboMom washed Baby Brains in the kitchen sink with all the dishes, and then she hung him out to dry on the line. Baby Brains, tired, tried to wiggle free, but the clothespins held him in place. He started to sway in the breeze along with the laundry. Baby Brains began to cry. "I want my mommy," he called. Mrs. Brains was upstairs when she heard her baby calling, and she looked out the window and could hardly believe her eyes. She raced down the stairs, through the kitchen, and into the yard. She grabbed hold of her baby. "Quick, Mom," said Baby Brains. "I think RoboMom is about to explode." As the smoke cleared, Mrs. Brains held her baby tight. "Thanks, Mom," said Baby Brains. That night, everyone helped cook dinner and clean up afterward. And later, Mr. and Mrs. Brains put Baby Brains to bed. It was nice to do things together again. Of course, Baby Brains didn't stop inventing. Soon he came up with something he was sure his mom and dad would enjoy. It was the new, improved RoboMom 2. Baby Brains and RoboMom by Simon James. I hope you enjoyed that story and our first story, Baby Brains. Don't stop inventing. You used your recycled trash today to build a robot. Maybe you can invent other things out of leftover trash, but wash it good and wash it well. And don't forget, you can always share your picture with us. Just send us an email with it in. Thank you. Have a happy Earth Day.